Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think you'd like to listen, sir.
Oh, I'm very sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with a wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep the science for life.
Oh, yes, sir.
Speaking of the science for life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Oh, yes, sir.
Oh, and by the way, Lane, I see from your book on Thursday, when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me last, that 8 bottles of champagne are listed as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment the servants invariably drink all the champagne? I merely ask for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households, champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Oh, good heavens. Is marriage really as demoralizing as all that?
Well, I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir, although I have very little experience of it myself. I've only been married once. That was as a result of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't think I'm much interested in your personal life, Lane.
No, sir, it's not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage are somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, then what on earth is the use for them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
Good heavens. Oh, gee. How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see.
I believe it is customary in good society to have some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since Thursday last?
Oh, in the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people that you amuse?
Oh, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
Oh, perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
Oh, immensely, you must amuse them. Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire. Yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea?
Merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Oh, yes, it is all well, rather, but I'm afraid that Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
Oh, dear chap, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way that Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen, and I've come up to town expressly to propose to her.
Oh, no! I thought you came up here for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I don't see anything romantic about proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, I'm sure, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why? One might be accepted. One usually is, I believe. And then the excitement is all over. The very essence of love is uncertainty. If I ever choose to get married, I shall certainly try to forget the fact.
I don't doubt that, dear Algy. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
Oh, there is no use speculating on the matter. Divorces are made in heaven. Touch the cucumber sandwiches, made especially for Aunt Augusta.
You've been eating them all the time.
Very different matter. She is my aunt. Oh, have some of the bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is too.
My dear chap, you need not eat it if you're going to eat it all. You act as if you're married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever shall be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Oh, well, in the first case, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
That is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary amount of bachelors you see everywhere. And in the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
Well, my dear chap, Gwendolen is my first cousin. And before I allow you to marry her, you're first going to have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
Bring me the cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last he dined here.
You mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you'd let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Oh, wish you would offer one, old boy. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there's no point offering a large reward now that the thing's found.
It is very mean of you to say, Ernest, honestly. Thank you. But it does not matter. For now that I read the inscription on the inside, I see the thing isn't even yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what's written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
It's absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I am quite aware of that fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case, is it? This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you just said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is too. Lives in Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algy.
Yes, but why does she call herself Little Cecily, if she's your aunt and lives in Tunbridge Wells? From little Cecily, with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts not tall. That is a matter surely an aunt can decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. For heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case!
Yes, but why does she call you her uncle? From little Cecily, with her fondest love, to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter her size, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack after all, it's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
You have always told me your name was Ernest. I have introduced you to people as Ernest. You answered the name of Ernest. You look like an Ernest. You're the most Ernest-looking person I've seen in my life. It is perfectly absurd to say that your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. I have one here. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B. for the Albany. I shall keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if you ever attempt to deny it to me, to Gwendolen, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country. And the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small aunt Cecily, who lives in Tunbridge Wells, calls you her uncle. Oh, come on now, old boy. You'd best have the whole thing out at once.
My dear Algy, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is precisely what all dentists do. Now, come on, tell me the whole thing. And I might mention that I've always suspected you of being a secretive and confirmed Bunburyist. I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to reveal to me of why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation, and pray, make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew adopted me when I was a little boy and made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle from motives of respect which you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my house in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prison.
Where's that place in the country, by the way?
Oh, that's nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly, the place is not in Shropshire.
Oh, I'm sure of that. I've Bunbury all over Shropshire on 2 occasions. Now, come on, tell me, why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algy, I don't know whether you'll be able to understand my real motives. You're hardly serious enough. When one is placed into the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I've always pretended to have a younger brother in the name of Ernest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, Pure and simple.
Oh, the truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't be a bad thing at all.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear. Don't try it. You should leave that to the people who haven't been to university. They do so well of it in the daily papers. What you are is a Bunburyist. Oh, I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. You're one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a younger brother by the name of Earnest in order that you may be able to go down to town whenever you like. I have invented a permanent invalid by the name of Bunbury in order that I may be able to go down to the country whenever I choose. Oh, Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's permanently bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I've really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for over a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know, you're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It's very mean. Nothing annoys someone as much as not receiving invitations.
You would much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dined there on Monday last, and once a week is quite enough time to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family, and sent down with either no woman at all, or two. Oh, in the third place, I know perfectly well whom she'll place me next to. She'll place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. It's not very pleasant. In fact, it's not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It all looks so bad. It's simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a secretive and confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily's a little too much interested in him. It's rather a bore. So, I am going to get rid of Ernest, and I strongly advise you do the same with with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to be extremely problematic, you'll be very glad to know him. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
Oh, that is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she's the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry, well, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. What you don't seem to realise is that in marriage, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and the happy English home is proved in half the time.
Oh, for heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
It isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. Oh, that'll be Aunt Augusta. Only relations or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her away for 10 minutes so you may have the opportunity of proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you at Willis's tonight?
I suppose so if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of them,
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you've been behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Oh dear me, you are smart.
I'm always smart, am I not, Mr. Worthing?
Oh, you are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
No, but I should hope I'm not that. That would leave no room for developments. And I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we're a little late, Algernon. I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I've never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. Now, I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolen?
Thanks, Mamma, I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane! Where are the cucumber sandwiches? I had ordered them especially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers.
No, sir, not even for ready money.
That will do, lady. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I am most distressed, Aunt Augusta, that there were no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its colour. From what cause, I of course cannot say. Thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman. So attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, that I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that. Well,
It is a terrible bore, and I need hardly say a great disappointment, but I've had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is dreadfully ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
it is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. The shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I should be much obliged, Algernon, if you could ask Mr. Bunbury from me if he'd be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is to be my last reception, and one wants something that encourages conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has said practically whatever they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll have a word with Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he's still conscious. And I think I can promise that he'll be quite all right by Saturday. Oh, of course, the music is terribly difficult. For if one plays good music, people don't listen. And if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the programme I've drawn out for you, if you'll kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Oh, thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. And I'm sure the programme will be delightful after a few expurgations. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I often feel they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
Well, I should highly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back into a room rather suddenly that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Oh yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact. I do often wish in public, at any rate, you had been a bit more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I knew I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the most expensive monthly magazines and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first told me that he had a friend called Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen?
Passionately.
Oh, darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest!
But you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest?
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is, but supposing it was something else, do you mean to say that you couldn't love me then?
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of life as we know them.
Well, personally, darling, to speak candidly, I don't care much for the name of Ernest. I don't think it suits me at all.
Suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I must say, I think there are a lot of much other nicer names out there. I think, Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack? Oh no, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all. I have known several Jacks, and they were all without a doubt more than usually plain. Oh, besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John. And I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be able to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely, you know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you were not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you. But you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to save you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair enough to tell you beforehand that I am more than determined to accept you.
Oh, Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
Well, you know what I've got to say to you.
You don't say it!
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. Oh, how long you have been about it. I'm afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one. I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully brown eyes you have, Ernest. They're quite brown. I hope you will always look at me like that, especially when other people are present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. It is hardly a matter she could be allowed to arrange for herself. Now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I'm making this inquiry, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolen. Gwendolen, the carriage.
Yes, Mamma.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Well, thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you're not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I'm prepared to enter your name should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
No, I'm glad to hear it. A man must have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in young London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
Well, that is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
I have a house in the country, with some land, of course, attached to it about 1,500 acres. But I don't depend on that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Oh, well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham. I don't know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She is a lady considerably advanced in years.
That nowadays is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. Well, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us. Or come in the evening, at any rate. Now, to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce? Or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
Well, I'm afraid I really don't know, Lady Bracknell. The fact is, I said I lost both my parents. It would be nearer the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was when I was found.
Found?
Yes, the late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an elderly gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing, because he happened to have a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It's a seaside resort.
Where did the charitable gentleman who had a first-class ticket to this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag. An ordinary handbag with handles to it, in fact.
Where did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across his ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake of his own.
The cloakroom? At Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial! Mr. Worthing, I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you've just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know where that unfortunate movement led to. As for the locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station, might serve to conceal a social indiscretion. Probably has indeed been used for that purpose before now. But it could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognised position in good society.
Or may I ask you what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say that I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I really don't see how I'm going to be able to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It's in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What is it to do with me? You can hardly imagine Lord Bracknell and I would dream of allowing our only daughter, a gal brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good afternoon, Mr. Worthing.
Good afternoon. You're playing that ghastly tune! How idiotic you are!
go off all well, old boy. You don't mean to say that Gwendolen refused you? I know it is a way she has. She's always refusing people. I find it most ill-natured of her.
Oh, Gwendolen is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we're engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. I've never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. She's a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. Oh, I beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't talk of your aunt in that way before you.
Oh, my dear chap, I love hearing my relations being abused. It's the only thing that makes me put up with them. Relations are simply just a tedious pack of people with not the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the slightest instinct of when to die.
That is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue the matter. You always want to argue about things.
Well, that is precisely what things were originally made
Oh,
for.
upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself.
Oh.
You don't think that there's any chance of Gwendolen becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algy?
Oh, all girls end up like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That is his.
Is that clever?
Absolutely, and as true as any observation in modern society should be.
I am sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting someone clever. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had some fools left.
There are.
Well, I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course.
Oh, what fools.
By the way, did you happen to tell Gwendolen about your being Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she's pretty. To someone else if she's plain.
That is nonsense.
And what about your brother, What about the profligate Ernest?
Oh, before the end of the week, I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy, and quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it is hereditary, my dear chap. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You had much rather say a severe chill.
And you're sure a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest to be carried off in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
Yeah, but I thought that you said that Miss Cardew was far too much interested in your younger brother Ernest. Don't she feel his loss a great deal?
Oh, that is all right. Cecily is not a silly romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She has got a capital appetite. Goes on long walks and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I would rather like to meet this Cecily.
When I will take very good care that you never do. She's excessively pretty and only just 18.
And does Gwendolen know that you have an excessively pretty ward who's only just 18?
Oh, one doesn't blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolen are perfectly certain to be extremely great things. I'll bet you anything you like, half an hour after they met, they'll be calling each other sister.
We'll only call each other that after they've called each other a lot of other things first. Oh, my dear chap, we really must be going if we're to get a good table at Willis's tonight. Do you know that it's nearly 7?
Oh, it's always nearly 7.
But I'm hungry.
Well, I never knew you when you weren't.
What should we do after dinner? Should we go to the theatre?
Oh, no, I loathe listening.
Well, we could go to the club then.
Oh, no, I hate talking.
Well, we could trot off the Empire at 10 then.
Oh, no, I can't bear looking at things, it's so silly.
Well, then what shall we do?
Nothing.
It's awfully hard work doing nothing. But I don't mind hard work if there's no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolen, upon my word.
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
No, really, Gwendolen, I cannot allow this.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You were not old enough to do that.
My own darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. And from the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. If few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children have to say. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out, and whatever influence I had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing she can say can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Oh, dear Gwendolen.
Oh, the story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred to the deeper fibres of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. Oh, the simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me.
Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Walton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose? Well, it may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn around now.
Thank you, I've turned round already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling.
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Sir, some bills have arrived, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going Bunburying.
Oh, yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back until next Monday. You can put up all my dress clothes, my smoking jackets, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Oh, Lane, you are a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
There's a sensible, intellectual girl, the only girl I ever cared for in my life. What are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm just anxious about poor Bunbury, is all.
Oh, if you don't take care, your friend Bunbury is going to get you into some serious scrape one day.
Oh, I do love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
Oh, that is nonsense, Algy. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Cecily, surely the utilitarian occupation of watering the flowers is better left to Moulton rather than you, especially as you have your intellectual pleasures ahead of you. Your German grammar is on the table. We open it at page 15 and we will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a very becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Oh, child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every possible way. He laid great stress upon German when he went up to town yesterday. In fact, he lays great stress upon German every time he goes up to town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious, I don't think he can be quite well.
Oh, your guardian enjoys the very best of health, and the gravity of his demeanour is commendable in one who is so young. I don't know anyone else who has such a high sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that's why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Your guardian, Mr. Worthing, has many troubles in his life. You must remember that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow the unfortunate young man, his brother, to come visit here sometimes. I think we would have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know, German and geology and things like that influence a man very much.
I'm not sure that I would have an effect upon a character whose own brother admits that he is weak and vacillating. I'm not sure I should even like to reclaim him. I am not in favour of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so should he reap. Now, stop writing in your diary. I don't know why you have a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should really forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry around with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that never happened. That couldn't possibly have happened. I think memory is responsible for nearly all 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Oh, do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel. I wrote one myself in younger and happier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. Oh, it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
Well, it's the good ended happily and the bad ended unhappily. That is what fiction is.
I suppose so. But it does seem rather unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript was abandoned. I speak as in lost or mislaid. But now, back to your work. These speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chatterbourne coming up through the garden.
How are we all this morning?
Oh dear Doctor, what a pleasure!
Miss Prism, I hope you are well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. But I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll in the park with you, Dr. Chatterbourne.
Well, no, I never said I had a headache, Cecily.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that. But I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
Cecily, I hope you're not being inattentive.
No, I'm afraid I am.
Well, that is indeed strange. In fact, if I had the honour of being Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I was speaking metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from the birds and the flowers. Well, I don't suppose Mr. Worthing has returned yet from town.
No, we don't expect him until Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes, I know. He likes to go to London on Sundays. He is not one of those whose sole purpose is enjoyment. Unlike, I gather, that unfortunate young man, his brother is. Well, I will not disturb the classic Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? No, my name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion merely, Miss Prism, drawn from the pagan authors. Well, no doubt I shall see you both in Evensong tonight.
Doctor, I think I will have a walk with you. I find I do have a slight headache, and I think a walk would do me good.
Oh, with pleasure, Miss Prism. With pleasure. Perhaps we might walk as far as the schools and back.
Oh, that would be delightful. Cecily, you may do your economic political economy while I'm not here. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may leave. It's all too sensational. These metallic things have their own melodrama, Doctor.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing's just driven over from the station. He's brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4 the Albany W. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I told him you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he wanted to speak to you privately for a moment.
Tell Mr. Ernest Worthing to come out here. I suppose you'd better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I've never met anyone really wicked before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he'll just be like everyone else. Oh, he does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You must be under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than unusually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I do not think that I'm wicked, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I'm wicked.
If you're not, then you've certainly been deceiving us all in a most inexcusable manner. I hope you've not been leading a double life. Pretending to be wicked but actually being good all the time. That will be hypocrisy.
Perhaps I've been a bit reckless.
I'm so glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention it, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I'm not sure you'd be so proud of that, though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It's much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
Oh, that is a terrible disappointment. For I'm due to go back on the first train on Monday morning back to London. I have a business appointment that I'm very anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Of course, I know how important it is not to keep a business appointment, if one is to retain any of the sense of the beauty in life. But I still think you'd better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to talk about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He's gone to buy your outfit.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy any of my outfits. He has absolutely no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you will require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said on Wednesday night that you'd have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Well, the accounts I've received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. No, this world is good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
Oh, I'm afraid I'm not that. But that is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission, if you don't mind, cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, do you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
Well, it is rather quixotic of you, but yes, I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You're looking a little worse.
That is because I am hungry.
How thoughtless of me. I should have known that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A red rose?
No. I'd sooner have a white rose.
Why?
Because you are like a white rose, cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. The prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that all sensible men would love to be caught in.
I don't think I should like to catch a sensible man. I wouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear doctor. You should get married. A misanthrope I can cope with. A womanthrope never.
I don't believe I deserve such a neologistic turn of phrase, Miss Prism. The precept and the practice of the early Christian primitive church was decidedly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason that the primitive church did not last until the modern day. You must realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads lesser women astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No man is attractive to anybody. A married man is attractive to anybody except his wife.
And even then, sometimes not even to her.
That depends upon the intellectual sympathies of the women. I mean, ripeness can be trusted. Maturity can be depended upon. Young women are green. Oh, I speak horticulturally, of course. I draw my metaphor from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Well, perhaps she followed us down to the schools and back. I'm not sure.
Mr. Worthing?
Mr. Worthing?
Well, this is a surprise. But we weren't expecting you until Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chancellor, I hope you're well.
My dear Mr. Worthing, I trust that this garb of woe does not signify some terrible calamity.
My brother.
Oh, more debts and extravagances, I expect.
Still leading his life for pleasure.
Yeah.
Dead.
Your brother Ernest dead?
Quite dead.
Well, that'll be a lesson to him.
Mr.
I
Worthing,
hope he learned from it.
Mr. Worthing, allow me to be the first to offer you my deepest consolations, my consolations. And you also have the consolation of knowing that at all times you were your brother's warm and generous brother.
Poor Ernest, he had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Yes, very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No! He died abroad, in Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
And was the cause of death mentioned in this telegram?
A severe chill, it seems.
Oh.
As a man sows, so should he reap.
Charity, Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. In fact, I am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No. No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? Well, that hardly points to any sane, sensible state of mind at the end. Well, I presume you would like me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic incident on Sunday?
Yes.
My sermon of the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to any occasion, joyful, or indeed, in this case, pitiful. I have preached it on many occasions, at harvest festivals, baptisms, at christenings, at weddings, funerals, days of atonement, and festal days. In fact, I last delivered it at the cathedral. The bishop who was present was most taken by some of the analogies I used.
That reminds me, dear Doctor, you mentioned christenings, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose you know how to christen all right. I mean, of course, you're continually christening, aren't you?
Oh, yes. I must admit that it is one of the most constant duties of the rector in this parish. I have often spoken to the lower classes about it, but they don't seem to understand what thrift is.
Do you have any particular infant in mind, Mr. Worthing? I gather your brother was unmarried, was he not?
Yes.
Oh, people who live for pleasure usually are.
Yes. Well,
But it is not for any child, dear Doctor. No, I'm very fond of children. The fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon if you had nothing better to do.
but have you not already been christened?
I don't remember anything about it.
What, do you have any serious doubts on the subject?
Of course I intend to have, but I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all, not at all. A simple sprinkling or indeed a total immersion of an adult is a perfectly canonical procedure.
Immersion?
Oh, you need have no apprehensions on that matter. A sprinkling is all that is necessary and I think advisable. Our weather is so changeable. Well, what time would you like me to perform the ceremony?
Oh, I might trot round about 5 if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 other ceremonies to perform at that very same time. A case of twins, which occurred on one of the outlying cottages on your very own estate. Mr. Jenkins, the carter, a very hard-working man.
I don't see much fun in being christened along with other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably. Admirably. Well, I must not linger any more in this house of sorrow, Mr. Welling. However, I would beg you not to be too bowed down by grief. These trials and tribulations are often a blessing in disguise.
Well, this seems to be a blessing of a particularly difficult time.
Uncle Jack, I am pleased to see you back. What horrid clothes have you got on? Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child, my child.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. You look as if you had toothache, and I have such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother, Ernest! He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense! I haven't got a brother!
Don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You wouldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out. And you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very glad tidings indeed.
Just when we got used to lost, it seems we're going to take his return.
My brother is in the dining room! I don't know what all this means. I think it is utterly absurd. Oh, good heavens.
Brother John, I have come from town to tell you that I'm very sorry for all the trouble that I've caused you, and I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to shake your own brother's hand.
Oh, nothing will induce me to shake his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful, and he knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be some good in someone that's willing to leave the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he's been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he's told me all about Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury. Well, I won't tell him to talk to you about Bunbury or anything else. It is enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Oh, I'll admit that all the faults are all on my side. But I must say that I think that Brother John's coldness to me is peculiarly painful. I'd expected a more encouraging reception, especially because this is the first time I have been here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake Ernest's hand, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Well, this shall be the last time I shall ever do it.
It is very pleasant indeed to see such a perfect reconciliation. I think we should leave the two brothers together now.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
That's a little premature.
You've done a perfect action today, my child.
Oh, you young scoundrel, Algy! You have no right to be here! You've got to leave as soon as possible!
Mr. Earnest's things in the rooms next to yours, sir. I suppose that'd be all right.
What?
Oh, Mr. Earnest's luggage, sir. I'll have it unpacked and put it in the room next to yours.
His luggage?
Why, yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, dressing box, 2 top hats, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay for more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart. Mr. Ernest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
What a terrible liar you are, Jack! I haven't been called back anywhere.
Yes, you have.
I've not heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duties as a gentleman have never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
Oh, I can quite understand that.
Oh, Cecily is a darling.
Oh, you are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why don't you go change? It is perfectly childish to be in mourning for a man who is staying with you for a whole week in your house as your guest. I call it grotesque.
You are not going to stay here for a whole week as a guest or anything of that time. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I'm not going to leave you whilst you're in deep mourning. Very unkind of me. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. Be very unfriendly if you didn't.
Well, Will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long about it. I've never seen someone take so long to change and with such little result.
Well, at any rate, it is better than always being overdressed as you are.
I'm occasionally a little overdressed. I always make up for it by being immensely overeducated.
Oh, your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to leave by the 4:05 train, and I hope you will have a pleasant journey back to town, because this bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been an enormous success. I'm in love with Cecily. and that is everything. But I must see her before I go to make arrangements for another Bunbury. Ah, there she is.
I just came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he sending you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then we've got to part.
Yes, it is a very painful parting.
It is always painful parting from people who one has known for such a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity. But even a momentary separation from anyone whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, yes.
I hope, Cecily, you shall not be offended if I say quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I'll write your remarks in my diary.
Really keep a diary? I'd be waiting to look at it. May I?
No. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and subsequently meant for publication. I hope when it comes up in volume form, you will buy a copy. Pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one must be very fluent and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I've dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you love me the wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't make much sense,
Oh,
does it?
Cecily!
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell her to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying until next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anyone in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
Oh, of course! Why, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months.
Yes, it'll be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how? How did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you of course became the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Oh, my darling, and when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 22nd of last March. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to settle the matter one way or the other. So after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree here. And the next day, I bought this little ring in your name. and this little bangle with the true lover's knot you promised me always to wear.
Did I get you this? It's very pretty, isn't
yes,
it?
you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given you for leading such a bad life. And here is the box in which I keep all your dear little letters.
My letters? But darling Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read.
Oh no! Couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. 3 wrote me after I broke off the engagement. So beautiful. So badly spelled. I can hardly read them right now without crying a little.
Darling, but was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of last September. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all. Cecily, I'm very much hurt indeed to hear that you broke it off. Particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it hardly would have been a serious engagement if I hadn't have broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
Darling, you are a perfect angel.
My romantic boy. I hope your hair waves naturally, does it?
Of course, with a little help from others.
I'm so glad.
You'll never break off our engagement again, will you, Cecily?
I don't think I could break it off now that I've actually met you. And, of course, there is a question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it's always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. I could see any married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
But, oh, my darling, did you really mean to say that you couldn't love me if I had some other name?
What other name?
Any name you choose. Algernon, for instance.
I like Algernon.
Oh, my sweet, darling little child. I really don't see how you can object to the name of Algernon. It's not a bad name at all. In fact, it's a rather aristocratic name. Half of the chaps who end up in the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest.
Oh.
I might even admire your character.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I could ever give you my full, undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in all the rites and practices of the church.
Yes. Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must seem at once on a most important christening. I mean, on a most important business.
Considering that we've been engaged since February the 14th and that we've only met for the first time today, I think it is rather hard of you to leave me for so long a period.
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must write his proposal in my diary.
Miss Fairfax is called to see Mr. Worthing. On very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Ah, yes.
Miss Fairfax? I suppose one of the many good elderly ladies who are associated with Uncle Jack and his philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. It is so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew? What a very sweet name. Something tells me we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much, after we've known each other such a comparatively short space of time. Pray, sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
That is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity of my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose.
I don't think so.
Well, outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is how it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. And once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be incredibly short-sighted. So do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Not at all, Gwendolyn. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You were here on a short visit, I suppose?
No, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
No, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, it is strange he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I'm very fond of you, Cecily. I've liked you ever since I've met you. But I'm bound to state that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish that you were, well, just a little bit older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Oh, pray do. I believe that when anyone has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be perfectly candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish you were fully 42 and more than usually playing for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honour, and disloyalty would be about as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the most noble possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the physical charms of others. Modern, no less so than ancient history, supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn. Did you say Ernest?
Yes?
But it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they've not been on good terms for a long time.
That accounts for it. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any dark cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
Oh, dearest Gwendolyn, I see no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Why our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I think there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
You must be under some strange misconception. Ernest proposed to me 10 minutes ago.
This is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30 p.m. If you could verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. I'm so sorry, darling Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dearest Gwendolyn, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I do feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
Oh, if the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got himself into, I will never approach it with him after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion like this, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
Oh, well, I'm glad to say that I've never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I invite tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh yes, a great many. From the top of one of those hills, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I would like that. I
hate crowds. I suppose that's why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here as people are in London.
Well, personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country, if anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
Ah, this is what the newspapers are calling agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering very much from it just at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, I've been told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen in the best houses nowadays.
Hand this to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I most distinctly asked for bread and butter, you have given me cake! I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
Save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl. There are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I'm trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighbourhood.
Ernest! My own Ernest!
Gwendolen, darling!
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
Dear little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Oh, thank you. You may.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is currently around your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack? Oh!
Here is Ernest.
My own one!
A moment, Ernest. Are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
What young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolen!
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolen. I mean to Gwendolen.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is currently embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Oh, Algernon Moncrief. Is your name really Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name certainly is John. It's been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on the both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
Oh, Gwendolen.
Oh, you will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I would like to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, I just have one question I would like to ask you, and much depends on your answer. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some slight importance that we know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolen, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life that I've ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I'm really quite inexperienced at doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you frankly that I have no brother Ernest, that I've never had a brother, and that I have no small intention of having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
Well, I'm afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It's not a very pleasant position for any young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly care to venture after us there.
Certainly. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
You
Scoundrel!
This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose.
Yes, and a wonderful Bunbury it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Oh, you have no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has a right to Bunbury wherever one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist? Good heavens!
One must be serious about something if one is to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunbury. What you're serious about having the remotest idea. Everything, I imagine. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction that I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite as often as you used to, dear Algie. It's a very good thing, too.
Well, your brother's a little off-colour, isn't he, Jack? You won't be able to disappear off to London quite as often as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
And as for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say that you're taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
And I can see no possible defence for you having deceiving such a brilliant, clever, and thoroughly experienced lady as Miss Fairfax, to say nothing for the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolen. That's all. I love her.
And I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
Well, there's certainly no chance of you marrying Miss Cardew.
And I can see no possible way of you, Jack, and Miss Fairfax ever being united.
Well, that is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk about one's own business. Only people like stockbrokers ever do that. And even then, only merely at dinner parties.
How can you sit there, calmly eating muffins when we are in this horrible trouble I can't quite make out? You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. The only way to eat muffins is calmly. Indeed, it's the only way to eat them.
I say it's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all, under the circumstances.
Whenever I'm in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, whenever I'm in really great trouble, as anyone knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At this moment in time, I'm eating muffins because I'm unhappy. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
Well, there is no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy manner.
Well, I wish you would have tea cake instead. I hate tea cake.
Good heavens! I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
Ah, but you said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you, under the circumstances.
Well, that is all very well, but the muffins are the same.
Algie, I wish to goodness you would go.
I'm not going anywhere before I've had dinner. I never go anywhere unless I've had dinner, and nobody does. Except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 this very afternoon under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements myself with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:30, and I will naturally take the name of Earnest. Gwendolen would wish it. We can't both be christened Earnest, it's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence that I've ever been christened by anybody, and I should think it extremely probable that I never was, and so does Dr. Chasuble. It is entirely different in your case. You've been christened before.
Yes, but I've not been christened for years.
Yes, but you've been christened already.
I know. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you're very sure of your never having been christened before, I must say that I think it's quite dangerous of you to venture on it now. You might become ill. You need hardly forgotten the fact that someone closely connected to you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said that a severe chill wasn't hereditary, didn't you?
Yes, I know it used to be, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making extraordinary improvements in things.
Oh, Algie, you're always talking nonsense!
Jack, you are at the muffins again! I wish you wouldn't. There's only 2 left. I told you I'm particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake!
Then why on earth are you allowed to be served to your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality?
Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet. And there's still 1 muffin left.
seems like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough.
They're looking at us. What a effrontery.
They're approaching. It's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to be producing an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak. Certainly not. Mr. Worthing, I just have one question I would like to put to you, and much depends on your reply.
Gwendolyn, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have the opportunity of getting to meet you.
It certainly seems like a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. It does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what possible explanation can you offer for pretending to have a brother? Was it so that you might have the opportunity to come up to town to see me more often?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not the moment for German scepticism. Their explanations appear to be quite satisfactory, and particularly Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
But I'm more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them? Yes. I mean, no. True. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. But which of us is to tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Couldn't we both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly.
Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, you are prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
To please me, you're ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. Where issues of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
We have moments of physical courage which we women know absolutely nothing about.
Darling!
Darling!
Lady Bracknell.
Oh, good heavens!
Gwendolyn, what does this mean?
Merely that I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, physical weakness in the old. The price of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin. I followed her at once by a luggage train. You will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolyn, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now, as regards Algernon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask whether it is in this house that your invalid friend Mr. Bunbury resides?
No, of course not. Bunbury does not live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
How did he die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed him this afternoon. I mean, Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury, he quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
What I mean to say is, Aunt Augusta, is he was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live. And so Bunbury died.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. However, I am glad that at the last he made up his mind to some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. Now that we have finally got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask you, Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to Miss Cecily Cardew, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married. Lady Bracknell.
I do not know if there's something peculiarly exciting in the air in this particular part of Hartford. The number of engagements that go on seem to me to be considerably above the proper average that the statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations? Any desire information? Until yesterday, I had no idea there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, SW, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifershire, NB.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They are open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
Oh, I've known grave errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby, a firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I'm told that one of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I'm satisfied.
Extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you'll be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English varieties.
A life crowded with incident, I think. Perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I myself am not in favour of premature experiences. Gwendolyn, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I'd better ask you if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds. That's all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000? And in the funds? Oh, Miss Cardew seems a most attractive young lady. Few girls of the present day have any really solid qualities. Any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come over here, sweet child. Pretty girl. Your dress is sadly simple. Your hair looks almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid can produce really marvellous results in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lacey, and after 3 months her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn round, sweet child. No, the side view is what I want. Quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The 2 weak points of our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. The chin a little higher, dear? Stallions largely upon the way the chin is. They're worn very high just at present. Algernon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't care tuppence for social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon. But I don't approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind. But I never dreamt for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I'm not in favour of long engagements. They give people the opportunity to discover each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot consent to marriage until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
But upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say, an ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. All commanders are.
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, but I do not approve at all of your nephew's moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible! He is an Oxonian!
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter, Lady Bracknell. During my temporary absence this afternoon to London, on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by means of a false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Perrier Jouet brew 89. Wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon of alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was well aware from the first that I have no brother, that I have never had a brother, and that I have no intention of having a brother, not even of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I've decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct towards you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, sweet child. How old are you, dear?
Well, I really am only 18, but I always admit 20 at evening parties.
You're perfectly right to make some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties? Well, it will not be so very long before you are of age and beyond the restraints of tutelage. So I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me for interrupting you again, Lady Bracknell, but it is only fair to tell you that according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London's society is full of women of the highest birth who have of their own free choice remained 35 years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To my own knowledge, she has been 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40. I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not be even more attractive at the age you mention than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait until I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I'm not punctual myself, I know, but I do like punctuality in others. And waiting even to be married is quite out of the question.
Then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
My dear Mr. Worthing, seeing as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait until she is 35, a remark which I'm bound to say seems to me to show a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be well aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear, we have already missed 6, if not 5 or 6 trains. If we miss any more, we'll expose ourselves to comment on the platform.
Well, we're all ready for the christenings.
Christenings? Is not that somewhat premature?
Both of these gentlemen have expressed a desire for an immediate baptism.
Their age? The idea is grotesquely religious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if you learned that was the way in which you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand, therefore, that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon, Lady Bracknell?
I don't think that, as things are now, it would be of much practical use to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I'm most grieved by your sentiments, Mr. Worthing. They savour of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views that I have completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, given your present mood appears to be of a particular secular variety, I will depart at once to the church. I have just been informed by the pew opener that for the past hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you say a Miss Prism?
Yes, I'm about to join her, Lady Bracknell.
Oh, allow me to detain you for one moment. This matter may prove to be of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
Miss Prism is the most cultivated lady, and she is the perfect picture of respectability.
Must be the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her. Let her be sent for.
Ah, she approaches, I think. Ah, she is nigh.
I was told you were waiting for me. I have been there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism? Come here, Prism. Prism. Where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104 Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator which contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame, I don't know. I wish I did. The facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day that you mentioned, a day that is forever branded in my memory, I arranged to take the baby out in its perambulator. I also had a somewhat old but very capacious handbag in which I intended to put this manuscript of this work of fiction that I had written in some of my spare hours. In a moment of abstraction for which I can never forgive myself, I put the manuscript into the bassinet and the baby into the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Don't ask me that, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited that handbag that contained the baby.
I left it in the left luggage locket of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria, the Brighton line!
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolen, wait for me here.
Well, if you are not long, I will wait for you all my life.
Lady Bracknell, what does all this mean?
I dare hardly suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly one thing.
Dear Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Yes, your guardian appears to be of very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as though you are having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They're always vulgar, often convincing.
Stop now.
Oh, I wish you would arrive at some conclusion.
This suspense is terrible! I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
Well, it certainly looks like mine. Here is the injury. There's a card of the upsetting of the Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. Inside there's a stain on the lining, which happened from the explosion of a temperance beverage. It took place in Lymington. Yes, and here are my initials. I'd forgotten that I had put them on here in a moment of extravagance. Yes, it is certainly my bag. I'm glad to have it restored to me. It has been rather bad without it for all.
More is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes, Mother!
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? Do not deny that is a serious blow. But after all, who can be the first to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
No, this is some error. There is the person who will tell you who you are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I'm afraid that the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you doubt that I ever had a brother? Oh, Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Hello. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother.
Hello.
Oh, Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother.
We've met.
Oh, Algy, you young scoundrel. You'll have to treat me more respect in the future. You've never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Not till today, old chap, I admit. I did my best, however, I was a little out of practice.
My own one, but what own are you now that you have become someone else? What is your Christian name?
Good heavens. I'd quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is quite irrevocable, I suppose?
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolen.
Then the question had much better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time I was left in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Oh, every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I had been christened. That's settled. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at this moment recall what the generous Christian name was, but I have no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but that was only in the later years, and that was a result of the Indian climate and marriage and indigestion and other things of that kind.
Algy, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear chap, we were never even on speaking terms. He died when I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army records of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta?
Well, the general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. But I have no doubt that his name would appear in any military directory.
Oh, the army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. M. Generals. Madam, Maxbom, Maidsley. Oh, what ghastly names they have. Markby, Migsby, Moncrief. Ah, Lieutenant, 1868. Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, General, 1897. Christian names. Ernest, John. I always told you, Gwendolyn, my name was Ernest. Well, it's Ernest after all. I mean, it's naturally Earnest.
Yes, I remember the General was called Earnest. I knew I had a particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest! Oh, my own Ernest! Oh, I knew from the start you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel you were sure to change.
My own one.
I have come to the conclusion that the teachings of the early primitive church were in error when it came to marriage. Miss Prison, Letitia, would you do me the honour of your hand in matrimony?
Frederick, at last!
Oh, Cecily, at last!
Oh, Gwendolyn, at last!
My nephew, you seem to be showing the signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realised for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.
Fantastic audience and for supporting us, and we've had fantastic audiences over the last several nights, so thank you so much. Thank you also to the backroom staff and technical crew without whom we couldn't do anything. And there are more of them than there are of us, so thank you so much. And last but not least, I wanted to say thank you to our producer, to our director, and our very own Algernon, who has taken us through the whole process, done a fantastic job, and he's
reiterate all the thanks that Peter has said, and to all of you here. I thought I should probably perhaps explain myself just for a second, all this that you've just seen. When we started this adventure in earnest, terrible joke, on the 9th of January, we wanted to achieve two major things. The first thing that we wanted to achieve was, well, for the actors having so much fun on stage. One of the reasons why we see amateur dramatics is that you want to see the fun that we have on stage, and I hope you saw that with all of us here today, because we are having a great time here. The second thing we want to do is it actually involves all of you, really. We've had a real tough time, obviously, with the last couple of years, and of course everything that's going on still today, and it's quite difficult in some ways to feel happy. Well, we wanted to make sure that you guys could all share with us that kind of happiness that is still available today, indeed in just the arts, but in many ways, wow, the arts. Indeed, when we come on stage, every smile we see, every laugh we hear, just reminds us why it's so important that we can all share a bit of a smile and a laugh together. And I just want to end really on a quote that means so much to me. It's by P.T. Barnum, which is, "There's no nobler art than that of making others happy."
Thank you very much.
Well done.